What's up, guys? Andy Hendricks here with Sweet Georgia Sports. We're talking NFL draft. It's the best time of the year for college football fans and NFL fans alike. I got with me my best friend AJ Merritt. What's up, AJ?
Hey, what's going on, Andy? To be honest, this is my first video with Sweet Georgia Sports, so what better way to start than to talk about the NFL draft, am I right?
Definitely. Quite the exciting time. So let's get right into it. Number one overall pick. Cleveland Browns have it, of course. Who are they picking?
Well, of course, just like you said, of course it's the Browns. And really, even though it doesn't require that extensive of a look, I've kind of thought about this because obviously the Browns have that need at quarterback. But when you look at all the top quarterbacks in this draft, none of them are really worthy of that number one pick. And I don't think the Browns want to repeat what happened last year when the Rams and Eagles took solid reaches on Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Even though they had that potential, it was still a reach to take them at 1 and 2. So really, I have them going best player available, going with Myles Garrett out of Texas A&M, the defensive end. I think he can really turn into that Jadeveon Clowney type player to become that top pass rusher for the Browns because they really need it.
Definitely. I think they'd be stupid not to take him. He's probably going to be a force in the trenches for years to come. So moving right along, Kyle Shanahan over on the West Coast, San Francisco 49ers, they've got pick number 2. Who are they taking?
And really, when I look at this top 5, I've never had so much trouble with the top 5 because typically you look at the elite prospects and you can really fill in the holes and where they're going to go. But here I've had a little difficulty with that because the 49ers are also a team that need a quarterback. And they obviously signed Brian Hoyer, who has history with Kyle Shanahan. But I don't think he's the guy that Shanahan wants to start for him next year. And I had Mitchell Trubisky going here for a while, but his hype is kind of lowered since the draft combine. So I also have the Niners going best player available. And it may not be who you think, but I'm going with Solomon Thomas, the defensive end out of Stanford. And they're investing another first-round pick in that defensive line. You're adding on to DeForest Buckner, Arik Armstead, and Earl Mitchell, who they just signed. And when you look at Solomon Thomas, he's got size, he's got speed. The only downgrade from him and Myles Garrett, really, is the fact that Myles Garrett played in the SEC and Solomon Thomas didn't. If Myles Garrett was not in this draft, I feel like Solomon Thomas could be in that conversation for the number one pick, and I think he'd be a great fit for that Niners team.
So last year we had 2 quarterbacks go first. This year we may have 2 quarterback killers.
Ain't that something?
All right, so number 3, up in Chicago, the Bears have it. They have so many holes. Who are they going to pick?
And like you just said, they have so many holes. Even though they just signed Mike Glennon, they still have a lot of holes to fill. And I feel like they could take any of these top prospects and fill some type of need. And here I have them going with Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback out of Ohio State. Because when you look at the Bears, the last 2 seasons, really, they haven't had that true number one corner. And it seems like Kyle Fuller, who was a first-round pick in the 2014 draft out of Virginia Tech, he hasn't really panned out to the player that the Bears wanted him to be. So I think drafting Lattimore really gives a spark to that secondary and gives them a true number one corner to go against guys like Jordy Nelson, Marvin Jones, Golden Tate, Adam Thielen. He's kind of established himself for some reason. But I think getting Marshawn Lattimore really helps his team out.
Definitely. The NFC North's a bloodbath, and they need some help. Moving on, down in Jacksonville, Jaguars have the number 4th pick. Who are they going to take?
Well, with the Jaguars, a lot of people have them taking Leonard Fournette, and I can see why, because he'd probably be amongst one of the best players available at number 4. However, they still have TJ Yeldon, who still has potential to be a quality NFL back, and they invested a lot of money into Chris Ivory, so I really don't understand why they would take another running back. And so here I look at this Jaguars team, and I think they need more defense. Obviously, Blake Bortles is having his issues, but I think adding a guy like Jamal Adams from LSU can really add some physicality and versatility, as Dan Quinn likes to say, to that Jags defense. Because when you look at a safety like Deshaun Gibson, who wasn't spectacular last year, but I think the play styles of Gibson and Adams can really blend well together. And when you look at A.J. Boye, who they just signed to a big deal, and Jalen Ramsey, who seems to be progressing into the player that everyone thought he would, I think adding Jamal Adams can really put the secondary together.
Definitely. Jaguars may be trending upward soon if they make a few good moves. So, number 5, the Titans have this pick via trade with the Rams from last year. Who are they going to take?
Well, for a while, I had the Titans going with a wide receiver, specifically Mike Williams, but I feel like the Titans are kind of looking at other things because they have another first-round pick, so they could potentially get a wide receiver like John Ross at that spot. And so I look at this, and I think Reuben Foster would be a great fit in Dick LeBeau's defensive scheme because he does a lot of things. He does a lot of linebacker blitzes, and he just does a lot of interesting things with his defense. So I think Reuben Foster is the playmaker in the middle that the Titans really need, and I think he would really solidify that defense because they signed Logan Ryan. They've got guys on that defense. If they could just add a little more, they need a safety and they also need a wide receiver. But I think adding Reuben Foster can really add some playmaking ability to that defense.
Definitely. The Titans are just a few steps away from being a contending team, or at least a competing team that can make the playoffs and maybe make some noise. So moving along, number 6, New York Jets. They have so many holes. They've got a lot of problems. What are they going to do?
Well, the Jets are an interesting team because they typically go with the best player available here. And I mean, a lot of teams do, but the Jets are one of the more known teams to do that because a couple years ago, they took Leonard Williams with the 6th pick in the draft, I believe, in 2015, even though at that time they had arguably the best defensive line in the league. And obviously, Leonard Williams has progressed into a solid player despite that turmoil with the front office and coaching staff. And here they could go with someone like Leonard Fournette. However, they still have some money invested in Matt Forte. So here I actually have them getting Deshaun Watson, the coveted quarterback out of Clemson. I think he can really help this offense. Even though they lost Brandon Marshall, if they can maybe add a receiver in the later rounds, I think adding Deshaun Watson can eventually lead this team back to the playoffs.
Definitely. It'd be nice to see some team give New England some trouble up there. Number 7, out in San Diego, our other West Coast friends. Who are they going to take?
Well, actually, Andy, I have to correct you here, but it's the Los Angeles Chargers. And as much as I hate saying that, it's true. They're unfortunately in Los Angeles too, even though it wasn't the most popular move. So here I look at the Chargers, and obviously they need defense. And for a while I actually had Jonathan Allen going here, but when you look at the guys they already have, they've got Melvin Ingram, they've got Joey Bosa, they've got Corey Lugitt. I don't know how you say his name, but they have all those guys. And I think adding a guy in the back end to eventually replace Eric Weddle would be Malik Hooker, the safety out of Ohio State. This guy is a ball hawk. This guy recorded 7 interceptions for Ohio State this past season, and I think he can really add that playmaking ability when paired up with Joey Bosa. And I think really Hooker and Bosa, when they reach their full potential, they can really transform this defense.
Seems like all those AFC West teams have really good defenses, and that would really pull another one together. But I'm still not used to the Chargers being in LA yet.
Definitely.
All right, number 8, our rivals, but they're not our most rival. We just hate them a little bit. Carolina Panthers. Who are they taking?
A lot of people, a lot of the draft experts, rather, have the Panthers taking a cornerback. It's either a cornerback or Leonard Fournette. And I look at this cornerback group, and outside of Marshawn Lattimore, I don't have another cornerback going until pick 19 with Quincy Wilson out of Florida. So really, I don't think the Panthers would want to take that big of a reach when they reached on 2 cornerbacks last year. So here, I actually have them taking Leonard Fournette. And this is not only a best player available type pick, but this actually fills a need because when you add a guy like Fournette, who pretty much ran that offense at LSU for 2 years, almost 3 if you want to say that, that really takes a lot of pressure off of Jonathan Stewart, who's been wearing down the last couple of years, and it takes pressure off of Cam Newton, who you saw make erratic mistakes and erratic throws because there was so much pressure on him to move that offense. So I think adding a guy like Fournette can really help them in a NFC South division that seems to be improving in defense every year.
Definitely. Cam needs some help back there. And number 9, we've got the Bengals. Andy Dalton needs some help. Who are they going to take?
Well, you nailed it right there, Andy. Andy Dalton does need some help. And right here, I actually have the Bengals taking Mike Williams out of Clemson, considered by most to be the number 1 wide receiver in the NFL draft. And actually, within the next 5 picks, I have several wide receivers going. So this is really where you see the skill positions taking play, along with Leonard Fournette, obviously. I think Mike Williams can really pair it well with A.J. Green because it's obvious to see that the loss of Hugh Jackson to the Browns, the loss of Marvin Jones to the Lions, and Mohamed Sanu to the Falcons really hurt them this past year, and it was obvious. And so I think adding a guy like Mike Williams to help Andy Dalton, who regressed significantly without his weapons, I think that can go a long way in making the Bengals return to the playoffs.
Well, it's time for Andy Dalton to finally make a playoff run and finally win a playoff game. So let's hope he gets some help.
Yeah.
Number 10, Buffalo Bills. This is an interesting team. They have a new head coach. They don't really have an identity as a defensive team or an offensive team. So who do you think they'll take?
And really, it'd be easy to say that with a defensive coach like Sean McDermott, who just came from being the DC for the Carolina Panthers, and the fact that they lost Stephon Gilmore, you'd think they'd want to go with the back end of the defense and go with cornerback. But like I said before, I feel like it'd be a big reach at corner. They could potentially go that route, but I feel like it would be a big reach. So actually here, I have them adding another wide receiver in Corey Davis. And here's why. Because when you add a guy like Corey Davis next to Sammy Watkins with kind of similar play styles, but Sammy Watkins is obviously more explosive in his play. And I think putting Corey Davis opposite of him could really give Tyrod Taylor some leeway in that offense, especially when you consider that the Bills lost Robert Woods and Marquise Goodwin in the offseason. So I think adding Corey Davis, who's not the fastest guy, but he's got some speed, I think that helps.
Cool. So number 11, a dreaded team down in Louisiana that us Falcons fans can't stand, the New Orleans Saints. Who are they going to take at number 11?
I can't stand this pick, but it is a very good pick. And I'm sure a lot of people by now are thinking, where's Jonathan Allen going to go? Because you'd think he'd go in the top 10, but I feel like sometimes you see guys, especially last year with Laramie Tunsil, and obviously he had that whole incident with Twitter and social media that caused his fall. But I feel like with Jonathan Allen's potential injury concerns, he might drop outside the top 10. But with a guy like Jonathan Allen, with that potential and the talent and the rawness that's there, I think the Saints really can't pass up on him. And eventually, I think he can really transform this defense. I mean, this is a guy who was considered a lock to be a top 3 pick. So if the Saints can somehow get him at 11, I think it would really go a long way for him.
Yeah, Saints need some help on that defense of theirs. Jonathan Allen would certainly do it.
Mm-hmm.
Number 12, Cleveland Browns, their second first-round pick. They have this via trade with the Eagles. Who are they taking?
And actually, this is where I had Mitchell Trubisky going for a little bit, but his draft stock has kind of fallen, like I said, since the combine, so I feel like he won't go till the latter of the first round. So here I actually have him going best player available again in O.J. Howard. And this is a very interesting pick because you think, well, they've got Gary Barnidge, so why would they take a tight end? Well, Gary Barnidge, he's just that type of player that he's not a long-term starter, and I don't think you look at last year, he did not have the same impact last year that he did 2 years ago. So I think taking O.J. Howard, who's a really raw prospect, and ever since the combine, his stock has really lifted to the point where a lot of people have him going inside the top 10. So I think getting him at 12 is a really nice value, and even adding more to that offense when you consider that they signed Kenny Britt and traded for the superstar Brock Osweiler.
Definitely. So we'll see what the Browns do with that. It's a very tight end heavy draft, so maybe O.J. will go at number 12. So, 13, Arizona Cardinals. They underperformed in 2016. Who are they picking to bring them back to competing?
And you look at the Cardinals and you think that maybe Carson Palmer's regressing, age is catching up to him. And while that is the case, I don't think that's the primary reason why the Cardinals were as underwhelming as people saw. And Corey Davis is someone that I really wanted to put at 13, but I feel like the Bills just wouldn't pass up on him because he fits the Bills so well and what they try to do on offense at least. So with the Cardinals, I do have them taking a bit of a reach with John Ross. And this might not be the smartest pick. However, they do add a lot of speed, and they add a player in John Ross who can really change that offense. Because you look at Michael Floyd, he got released and he went to the Patriots because of his issues, and he's actually in prison right now. So I guess that was a good move. And then Larry Fitzgerald is aging. Even though he's still a very consistent receiver, he's still aging. And I think adding a guy like John Ross, who if they use right, that offense paired with David Johnson, who's a stud, and then give Carson Palmer a couple more years in the league.
Definitely. We saw a really good Cardinals offense in 2015. Maybe a pick like this could bring it back. Number 14, Eagles have this pick via trade with the Vikings. Who are they picking?
Now this is a This is kind of a interesting pick because you just saw the Eagles release Connor Barwin, who for the past few seasons was considered their best edge rusher. And I'm not sure how you say his name. Is it Hassan Reddick? Hassan Reddick? I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Temple fans, I hope you don't kill me for butchering his name. But I do have him going to the Eagles. And he's not a day one impact starter. He probably will start day one if he does go to the Eagles, but he won't make that big impact for a couple of years until he reaches his full potential. And I think really adding that type of player to the Eagles defense, he just fits with the Eagles. And I think adding him to that talented front seven can really help them.
Definitely. And the NFC East is always scary, so adding him to it just makes the games more fun. Number 15, we've got the Colts. They underperformed, but we don't know what they're going to do at number 15. What do you think?
Well, 15, I actually have them taking a bit of a reach, although the player they're taking is someone that I'm very high on, and that's Dalvin Cook, the running back out of Florida State. And really, I have this guy rated higher than Leonard Fournette. I personally like him more than Fournette, and I think he just has more potential than Fournette. But unfortunately, it's not about what I think. It's what I think the team is thinking, or the teams rather. And I think getting Dalvin Cook at 15 is great value, and I think he's an instant starter because Frank Gore, he's probably got one more year if he hasn't retired already. I'm not even sure, but I think Dalvin Cook is someone that can step in day one and make an instant impact and help take some pressure off of Andrew Luck.
Definitely. Andrew Luck needs some help, and Dalvin Cook could be a guy to do that. He's very dynamic and explosive and could really boost that offense even more. Number 16, Baltimore Ravens have it. Who are they picking?
Well, this is a great pick in my opinion because you just saw the Ravens release Elvis Dumervil, who for a number of years was a very solid pass rusher for the Ravens and the Denver Broncos. And here I have them taking Taco Shelton out of Michigan. I think this is a great pick because this is someone, he's going to the other Harbaugh brother with John Harbaugh. And there's not much to say about this. He's just a really solid player, and I think John Harbaugh can use him very well with the Ravens' defensive scheme.
Definitely. It'd be good to see the Ravens have a dominant defense again. Number 17, Washington Redskins with their front office. Who are they picking?
The Redskins. They just fired their GM, so we'll see what they do in the draft. But right here I have them taking Christian McCaffrey. And this might be interesting because since he's a white running back that's good, everyone expected him to go to the Patriots. But since they traded that first-round pick to the Saints, and the fact that McCaffrey is actually his draft stock has risen significantly, I have him going to the Redskins because when you look at the Redskins, they don't have a true number one running back. So I think adding McCaffrey is someone that can really step in as a true number one running back and someone that Kirk Cousins can really utilize well.
You like that? Number 18, Tennessee Titans with their second first-round pick. Who are they taking?
And now this might be an interesting. This is an interesting pick. It's not that it might be. It is an interesting pick. I have them taking Jabril Peppers, the linebacker, safety, quarterback, cornerback, wide receiver, running back, whatever you want to call him, out of Michigan. Another guy from Jim Harbaugh's squad. And I think Peppers is a very interesting player. I think he fits more as a safety. I just don't think he has the size to play linebacker, or the strength rather, although he is pretty strong for a guy his size. Even though he only has one career interception, I do think he can fit well in Dick LeBeau's scheme because when you look at the versatility and just everything he did for Michigan, I think Peppers can really fit what Dick LeBeau is trying to do. And when you pair him up with Reuben Foster, I think that just adds even more to the defense. And obviously, they still need a wide receiver, but I feel like you can add a wide receiver in the second or third round. So I think this is a good pick for the Titans.
Titans buff up that defense. They can make some noise in the AFC South. So number 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They gave us some scares early on. They beat us in the first game. Who are they taking at 19?
And this is under the radar pick. When you look at the fact that they drafted Vernon Hargreaves from Florida last year, and he performed decent, and I think he'll eventually progress into a very good player. And since they just released Altron Werner, I really think Quincy Wilson fits what this team is trying to do. They're adding another cornerback out of Florida, and Quincy Wilson could potentially go even higher than 19. So I think the Buccaneers going with Wilson at 19 is a good value, and it also fits a need as they try to build that defense even more.
In a division with Matt Ryan and Drew Brees throwing the football, you got to be able to have some corners. Number 20, Denver Broncos. We thought they'd make the playoffs, but they didn't. Who are they going to take?
Well, with the Broncos, I think a lot of people are expecting a quarterback because depending on the Tony Romo situation, it seems like he might be headed to Houston, but we'll just have to see what happens. Right here, I have them taking an offensive lineman out of Wisconsin, who is considered one of the higher, if not the highest rated offensive lineman in the draft, is Ryan Ramczyk out of Wisconsin. And I think this guy he just really fits what the Broncos want to do. Because you look at Wisconsin, they've kind of always been known as that power run team, and although they haven't been completely true to that in a couple of years due to their coaching, I do think Ramczyk can really add some power and just meanness to that Broncos O-line.
Definitely. So now as we get later into the draft, teams don't always have their first choice anymore, and they may have to spin a little bit. Do you think the Lions at 21 are going to have to panic and make a move, or they're going to have their man?
Really, I do think the Lions are going to kind of take a reach, and this is a guy that not many people are talking about, and this is Tre'Davious White out of LSU. And you might be thinking, why are the Lions taking a corner? And really, it comes down to the fact that the offense seems to be fine because they did lose Larry Warford, but they also signed TJ Lang. So they're probably not going to go with offensive line, as well as the fact that they did sign a tackle. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they did sign a couple offensive linemen. So I do think you look to the defense because they were worn down against the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs, and I think adding a guy like Tre'Davious White not only adds depth in that secondary, but a playmaker in the secondary, because when he was at LSU, he really did some damage. So I think this is a good pick for the Lions.
At number 22, the Miami Dolphins, another team that we don't really know their identity yet. They're still trying to figure out what they're doing. Who do you think they're picking late in the first?
Well, here, I think this is a team that not many people are considering that they might take a quarterback, because even though Ryan Tannehill is under a strenuous contract, it doesn't seem like Adam Gase sees him as that potential future guy. So they might end up taking a quarterback here. They might end up taking a quarterback later in the draft. But right here, I actually have them taking Sidney Jones, the cornerback out of Washington. And I think this is a great pick, even though Sidney Jones did get injured at his pro day at Washington. So his draft stock might go down even more than it already has. I do think this is a solid pick for the Dolphins because when you look at the Dolphins cornerbacks, Tony Lippett was one of their starters, and in college he played wide receiver at Michigan State. So I think adding Sidney Jones really shores up that secondary.
Definitely. And you mentioned Ryan Tannehill. Isn't it always his year to break out?
It always is.
We'll see if he really does this year. Number 23, New York Giants. They swept the Cowboys last year. They made a couple nice moves in the offseason already. Who do you think they're picking?
And here, assuming they're bringing back Jason Pierre-Paul, because if they don't, then I could see them taking a pass rusher here, an edge rusher. And really, I feel like other than that, the defense doesn't need any touching because the defense was very impressive last year, considering how bad they've been in the past. So I think you just got to look at offense, and they did sign Brandon Marshall, and they obviously have Odell Beckham Jr., Eli Manning, Sterling Shepard, and they could potentially add a running back here too, potentially Alvin Kamara, even though I don't think he's a first-round guy. They could potentially get him, but I have them going with David Njoku out of Miami, the tight end. I think this is a great pick. I think this is a guy that Eli Manning can really rely on in the middle of the field and give them another option on the offense.
Definitely. That offense has some deadly people with Odell Beckham Jr. and Brandon Marshall now. Be cool to have that another piece. So, number 24, the Raiders. It looked like they were going to make some noise in the AFC, but unfortunately Derek Carr was injured towards the end of the season. Who are they taking at number 24?
And it really sucked to see Derek Carr get injured because if you look at it, he could have potentially ran away with the MVP. And obviously, being a biased Falcons fan, I would say no, that's not possible because Matt Ryan had a better season. But he was the reason the Raiders were so good, and it showed in the playoffs. Now, one thing that I noticed is that they lack depth in that secondary. They obviously have Reggie Nelson. They drafted Carl Joseph last year, who I think be a decent player. And they also signed Sean Smith. And they got David Amerson. I mean, they've got pieces on that secondary, but I feel like they need to add another guy. I think Garyon Conley out of Ohio State, he's a corner that not many people are talking about, but his draft stock has been rising significantly as of recent. I think adding him can really shore up that secondary even more and push the Raiders into that Super Bowl contender spot that people have been wanting them to be in for a long time.
It'd be nice to see the Raiders get good again. Number 25, Texans are just a quarterback away from competing. Are they taking a quarterback here?
Well, you just hinted at it. Yes, they are taking a quarterback, and this is another one of those picks where it isn't only the best player available, but it also fills a need. And I have them going with Mitchell Trubisky, the quarterback out of North Carolina. And he might go higher in the round. He could potentially go to the Broncos. He could potentially go to the Dolphins even. We'll have to see what they do. But I think this is a great pick for the Texans because Bill O'Brien, he knows quarterback, and to see that Brock Osweiler couldn't perform with a coach like Bill O'Brien, it obviously shows that Brock Osweiler was just not the guy. And I think getting a guy like Trubisky can really help them because this is a guy that was considered a top 5 talent before the combine. And even though his draft stock is diminished since then, I really think he can help the Texans take that next step.
You know, people are saying that if Brock Osweiler wasn't giving the ball away in the playoffs, maybe the Texans could have given the Patriots some more trouble. Number 26, Seattle Seahawks. Who are they taking?
Well, with the Seahawks, you did see them make a couple moves in the offseason. In fact, they just signed Eddie Lacy today. Today is March 14th, so they did just sign Eddie Lacy. And here I have them going with an offensive lineman. This is a guy who a lot of people are sleeping on because he could potentially be a top 15 player, and this is Garrett Bowles, the tackle out of Utah. And I think this guy could potentially be a great lineman for the Seahawks and just give Russell Wilson some help, really, because he's just getting chased around back there every play.
Yeah, I'm tired of all of their offensive linemen being former defensive linemen. Number 27, Kansas City Chiefs. Who are they taking?
Now, this pick, I wasn't sure where to go with this pick because typically the Chiefs are also a team that either trade down or go best player available. And this might be a very wild card pick because they could go in a number of different directions, but I have them taking Cam Robinson, the tackle out of Alabama. And this guy was also considered top 15, a top 10 talent, but recent issues have since diminished his draft stock. And I really just think adding him can give Alex Smith some more protection because he could potentially slip into guard. We'll just have to see what happens, but I think he could potentially fit well with that offense.
All right, moving along. Number 28, the Cowboys. They overperformed great in 2016. Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott were wonders as rookies. Who are they taking at 28?
Well, this is, again, another pick where their needs and the best player available matches up. And actually, I had this guy going to the Falcons for a little while, but I feel like the Cowboys would pounce on him before the Falcons, and he might even go higher than 28, but I have Derek Barnett out of Tennessee going to the Cowboys. I think this really, Derek Barnett can really bring that number one pass rusher type play to the Cowboys, and they've kind of been lacking that ever since they lost to Marcus Ware. So I think adding Derek Barnett, who is very consistent at Tennessee, he broke Reggie White's career sack record there. I think he can really be a very solid player for Jason Garrett and Jerry Jones.
All right, number 29, Green Bay Packers. They seem to always be competitive and be good, but they're just a few steps away from getting over the hump. Who do they get to get them over the hump?
Well, a lot of people, or not a lot of people, just people that I've talked to or read on, seem to think that they should go with defense. And although their defense did underperform greatly this year, they do have a lot of nice pieces and guys like Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins, who had very solid rookie years. And when you look at the loss of TJ Lang, I think they want to make sure they keep that stability at the offensive line group, and they're going to go with Forrest Lamp here. And I think Forrest Lamp is going to be a great player. In fact, I wish he didn't go with this pick because I would love the Falcons to get him. I think Forrest Lamp is going to be very solid in Green Bay. I think he kind of fits that same style that TJ Lang has at that guard spot. And really, this is the number one interior lineman in the draft, so I think getting him at 29 is a very good value.
All right. Number 30, Pittsburgh Steelers. Once again, a team that's always competitive, but they're a few steps away from the top. Who do they get to push them to the top?
And this is another interesting pick because at the Combine, you saw Evan Ingram, the tight end out of Ole Miss, really show up. He was faster than any tight end at the Combine by a long shot. And I have him going to the Steelers here. And this might be a bit of a reach because maybe he's more of a early second round, mid second round guy. But I think Evan Ingram can really add some speed to that tight end spot, especially with the departure of Heath Miller. They just have a whole bundle of tight ends, Ladarius Green, Jesse James, Will Johnson, I believe. They just have a lot of guys. And I think Evan Ingram could potentially be that number one or number two tight end, depending on how things shape up. But I think he can really add even more speed to the offense.
All right, so number 31, the one all the Falcons fans have been waiting for, the one I've been waiting for, our own Dirty Birds. We don't have any real holes or major areas that we need to fill, but we have areas that we want to improve to get us over the hump and hopefully not have another moment like we did this February. Who are we going to take at 31?
And really, with the Falcons, the biggest thing is just depth. You saw against the Patriots, we just got worn down. I mean, the defense played over 90 snaps, and I don't think hardly any team could play 90 snaps and still win the game. So really, you look at the Falcons, and you're just thinking depth. And with the potential signing of Dontari Poe, and just all the offseason rumors going around, I actually don't have the Falcons going with the defensive lineman here. I actually have them going with Dan Feeney, the offensive guard out of Indiana. And a lot of people aren't talking about this guy because Forrest Lamp is that main topic of discussion when it comes to interior linemen. I think Dan Feeney can really potentially start day one, assuming Chris Chester retires, or even if Chester doesn't retire, I still think Feeney can give Chester some trouble at that starting lineup.
Falcons' offensive line was very solid in 2016, but if we could even improve it, we would be very deadly. Moving on, number 32, the Saints have another pick via the Patriots Brandon Cooks trade. Who are they taking at the last pick of the first round?
Well, this is actually an interesting pick because you just saw the Saints release Jarris Byrd, and he was a major disappointment in New Orleans, even though he played really well with Buffalo in his years there. So I actually have the Saints going with Obi Melifonwu. Again, I hope I said his name right. UConn fans and Obi, I hope you guys don't kill me for butchering that if I did. But I think at the Combine, Obi really showed up. And this is just a perfect example that the Combine is where players emerge. You saw last year or 2 years ago, Byron Jones really established himself at the Combine, and that's why he was a first-round pick. I think Obi Melifonwu, he ran a 4.4 40, 44-inch vertical jump, and a 141-inch broad jump. This guy's 6'4", 224. I think he can be a really great safety for the Saints. I think with him pairing up with Jonathan Allen, I just think that helps the defense even more.
The Saints get a defense to support Drew Brees. The Falcons will have a lot of trouble in 2017, and we don't want that to happen. There you have it. There's our take on the NFL draft. What do you think? Let us know. Comment below or hit us up on Twitter @SweetGASports. Make sure to check out our Instagram with the same handle. See ya.